Oh, that is the S actually. That's the IP address. Are they able to hear us now? Are you ready? Matt and I are talking about secret things.
Hi. Welcome to the Atheist Experience, live from beautiful Dillahunty International Studios. Hey, I heard music. Joe's working the sound for us today. We're rotating people through so we can train so that if anybody wants to take a day off, we can still do as much of the show as possible. It's Sunday, and since I don't see the graphics like I normally do, I've completely forgotten what the date is.
20th.
So the 20th?
21st.
21st?
21st.
All I know is it's Father's Day. We are live here. Happy Father's Day to all you fathers out there. We are not fathers. We're just a couple of mothers. But happy Father's Day to my dad, who isn't watching the show, but I'll call him afterwards. As a reminder, even though we normally go to dinner after the show, we're actually not going to do that today because it's Father's Day and people have stuff to do with their dads. So, and I'll probably mention that again. But anyway, this is the Atheist Experience, live every Sunday from 4:30 to 6 p.m. Central. You can sort out the time in your own time zone. You can go to our website, www.atheist-experience.com, for more information about the show. We're sponsored by the Atheist Community of Austin, a nonprofit educational organization promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state. You can find out more about the ACA at the ACA website, www.atheist-community.org. You can also email us at tv@atheist-community.org. That email goes to myself, the co-hosts, most of the people behind the scenes. I'm forever and a day behind on emails, but other people have jumped in. We can't possibly answer all of them, but we do read all of them, and I'll do what I can to get caught up when I can. How you doing, Jeff?
I'm doing well, Matt. Thank you.
This
How
is
are you?
Jeff D., who I hadn't actually introduced, and I'm Matt Dillahunty.
Yeah.
We are
the Atheist Experience guys.
See, he's so used to saying
This
the
time
non-profits.
Yeah.
Because that's another program the ACA also sponsors, which is also done from here.
Yeah.
Created by Jeff D.
Sometimes even with people sitting on this very couch.
Sometimes. And a table with some other chairs out, because we get 4 or 5 voices involved. Dennis Lobay hosts the show. It features myself, Russell Glasser, Schilling, at least for next week. Thad England joins us on occasion. Jeff D. when we can get him. And you can find out more about that at nonprofitsradio.com. That's PROPHETS. And we're live every other Saturday on that show. We were not live yesterday. We'll be live next week. As a reminder, I still haven't checked the calendar, but on the weekend of July 11th, 12th, somewhere in that range, I've forgotten the dates, there won't be any shows. No nonprofits, no Atheist Experience, because I will be in Las Vegas, baby.
At TAM, right?
At TAM. The Amazing Meeting 7. Hosted by the James Randi Educational Foundation. It's a huge skeptics conference that I've been wanting to go to for, 7 years now, and this year I'm going. Mm-hmm. Already booked, already set up, good to go.
Awesome.
And Beth and I will be down there and kicking back and enjoying it. If you want to find out more about the ACA, you can go to the website, and normally you could call us on the telephone because we take live calls during the show, but since we're not in the public access studio, we're doing this from my home. We're doing it over Skype. Now, Skype is a voice over IP application, so you'll need a computer, which if you're watching this, I think you probably have one. There's a chance that we may rebroadcast this at the public access. But for now, we're streaming it live over Ustream. Frank will get the website address. Although, does it really make sense to put the Ustream address up on the show that you're Ustreaming? Never mind, you don't have to worry about that.
For those people that catch this episode on, say...
But the graphics don't go to that. The graphics only go to the stream. Wow. Hey, we're doing the best we can with what we got. We've got, 3 computers, a soundboard, a video camera, a pegboard full of all kinds of decoders.
There's amazing, because they've got one of those things with the 2 wires, the lightning that goes up, like you see in old horror movies. They got one of those. It's awesome.
We have Muhammad, the sacred cow.
And who's the other one?
I forgot.
Also Muhammad?
Muhammad.
Son of Muhammad?
Muhammad Jr. This one's Sufi and this one's Sunni. Anyway, Shiite. Yeah, we've completely forgotten. Oh, Shiite. I completely forgot what we were talking about. This is what happens when you do guerrilla TV from home.
You were doing
and it's live.
Credits. You were doing announcements and things.
I was doing announcements.
Sort of.
Anyway, normally we get together. Oh, Skype. That's what I was saying.
Yeah.
Download Skype, SKYPE, from Skype.com. Set yourself up an account and add the account Atheist TV. ATHEIST TV. No spaces, all one word. Boom. Do not call. What, did I spell it wrong?
No.
What are you grinning about?
That it is often spelled wrong. ATHIEST.
Yes.
The atheist. Yeah, I'm the most atheist.
I'm the atheist. I'm more atheist than you.
But now I'm just confusing everyone, so
Yeah.
I was having my own little private joke.
Okay, but I can see you.
If it's important,
And they can
if it's
see
important,
you.
believe me, I'll elbow you or something to
Okay.
say, allow me to speak.
All right. So anyway, if you download Skype and set up an account and add Atheist TV, you can then communicate with the show. Do not call. Do not make calls to Atheist TV. There are a number of great things about Skype. We've had a lot of feedback over the last week. We greatly appreciate it. One is that the audio quality is really good. We're hoping that continues. We're using different mics this week, so please feel free to keep the feedback coming. But there's a lot of things that we can't do with Skype, and one is to have multiple callers queued up in actual calls like we can in the studio where we have multiple lines. What we've had to do is send an IM to Atheist TV with your name, where you are, what you'd like to talk about, and Joe will review those, talk to you, get you added to a queue, and then he will make outgoing calls. So if you want to be called, get that information, and then wait by your Skype for the call. And don't call us, we'll call you. It worked out really well last week, but we didn't get to nearly, there were only like a dozen or so people that were waiting to call. We only took 3, 4, 5.
That's because,
Well, there's
there's those calls that just go on too long.
over the past week, there's, 70, 80 new people who sent their contact stuff right off the bat. I don't know how many are waiting, but do you have anything you want to get to before we take calls?
No, I got stuff, that I can throw out there, but if we got callers lined up, let's take them.
Who do we have, Joe?
That's always the funnest, most fun part of the
Pete Belcher from Illinois.
Pete from Illinois. We're calling you now. Dun, dun, dun. It's ringing, I think.
And we can't hear that, huh? I don't hear it.
I turn it off the ringing noises. We won't hear anything until Pete actually answers.
So, what do we do with this awkward moment when we're waiting for the
hear
caller
me?
to pick up?
I can hear you. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you guys.
Is this Pete from Illinois?
Indeed it is.
How are you,
Okay.
sir?
Just fine.
What did you want to talk about?
First-time caller, long-time viewer, and I wanted to make a bit of a prediction. Hold on a second. I'm getting like double. Okay, there. Sorry about that. I was getting sort of like an echo there.
Have you got
Anyway, I have a sort of 2012 prediction,
Yeah.
which relates back to the whole resurrection thing. I know that, Matt, that you dealt with somebody by the name of K-Bane. His name was Jake when he called the show on your show a couple weeks ago. But essentially my prediction for 2012, aside from the obvious fact that nothing is likely to happen, is the fact that many of these people who are sort of new age gurus and have a lot invested into making all of these predictions and claims about 2012, despite the fact that nothing will happen, will claim that something has happened. Either they'll claim that it was something which was only experienced by an elect few, or they will say that it is something intangible like a shift in cosmic consciousness, which I know a lot of them are already hedging their bets in that department, or they will say essentially that some mass event was averted by the intervention of some guru. And the way that relates back to the resurrection is the fact that I think that there's a kind of a naivete when it comes to the resurrection apologists, in the fact that they seem to have this core premise that if Jesus had not risen from the dead, the disciples just wouldn't have ever bothered to make the claim that he was. They had too many reasons not to. But in reality, when we actually stop and look at situations in which prophecies have been disconfirmed in some way, what happens more often than not is that the groups will invent victory out of the jaws of defeat. We would expect normal, rational people to just simply go, okay, we were wrong, and disband. But groups like this, more often than not, they say, well, something did happen. It's just that you weren't around to see it. And I think that, undermining their premises for why they think that the gospel writers are reliable in regards to their claims is often more effective than just dismissing miracle claims outright. Because I think that when you do that, they kind of have this sense of vindication, like, well, they dismissed us out of hand, so ha ha ha, we still win.
Well, that'll be interesting to see. Back when I was hosting the show, leading up to the Y2K moment, for a year we had a segment on this very program called the Rapture Report. And basically what we did was, from all over the internet and other news sources, we collected predictions of the impending end of the world that were usually Christian, but not always. And then on the date that was predicted for that world-ending event, we would report that it hadn't happened. Or usually the weekend after, because that's when we did the show. I don't remember, we went over dozens and dozens and dozens of these predictions, and I don't remember any of them making the particular excuse that you're talking about, that you are predicting. Usually they would either shut up and you wouldn't hear from them again, or they would simply revise their prediction. They'd say, oh, well, I calculated it to be, on this particular day in the year 2000, but now we know that, no, I misinterpreted the number of legs on the horses of the apocalypse or something, and now my new prediction is for this date. And then eventually they'd go away. We had to drop the segment eventually because there just wasn't enough to report.
We're way past Y2K.
But we may need to resurrect that segment as 2012 approaches, because
Y2K12.
Yeah, son of Y2K. I don't know.
All right. Well, that's all really that I wanted to say. But like I was saying, I think that a lot of the whole the resurrection argument, they make all of these. They try and play it as, if Jesus hadn't been resurrected, then why would the disciples claim otherwise? And I think that there are examples throughout history of different religious groups when their prophecy has failed to be fulfilled. They'll just, like I said, they'll invent victory out of the jaws of defeat. I know there was a group in Japan where, he predicted, the cult leader predicted that an event would occur on a specific day, and then it didn't happen, and he committed seppuku, he cut his abdomen open, but he survived it, and then afterwards, retroactively said that the reason that the end of the world was averted is because he took the sins of the world onto himself, and that sort of thing.
Well, we should send him like a thank you card or something. There's a number of cases like this that touch on what you're talking about. I think, to kind of diverge back to what you're talking about with regard to the Jesus resurrection and why would, for example, the disciples say that it happened? I don't know that they did. That's one of the positions I'm in. I'm not in the case of calling eyewitnesses liars because I'm not aware that I have any eyewitness reports at all. I have second and third hand reports. It may have been the case that they were lying. It may have been the case that they were delusional. It may have been the case that they were mistaken. It may have been, one of those things where I heard it from somebody who heard it from somebody, and it could be. The reason I think that your prediction is likely to come true in part, and the reason I think we see some of this, some of the events like this, has to do with how much somebody has invested in something. Unlike the scientific method, where you have a great investment perhaps in your hypothesis, but you have a greater investment in the truth, so that when a particular experiment fails, your investment in discovery of the truth allows you to say, oh, this failed. Clearly I was mistaken, or I've done something wrong. I need to investigate and figure out what happened and rework things and keep going. But and I'm sure there are, I'm not saying that scientists are these, pillars of propriety and and are completely emotionally divested. No, I think they're very passionate about it, but they have a larger investment in truth by and large. In the cases of these 2012 predictions or any sort of prophecy like this, what you have is somebody getting emotionally invested and perhaps financially invested as well in something that is a core value that to them isn't superseded by anything. It's very rare that you're going to find somebody whose investment in truth is such that it's going to override it. And so, yeah, you're going to have people saying, oh, well, something happened, or nothing happened because we did X. And then there's going to be others, of course, that say, well, we got the date wrong, and this is still coming. And despite the fact that they've obviously been wrong once, they're going to keep going.
Yeah, they'll milk it as long as they can and eventually drop it and try to salvage what's left of their reputations.
Yeah, I got a word of knowledge from God, and he told me this wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I 100% agree. And I think, when we look at the disciples, you have a group of people who abandoned their jobs, they abandoned their possessions, they abandoned their families and followed an itinerant preacher around the desert for, 3+ years or so. And they had everything invested in that. My basic point was, and I didn't mean it so much as criticism, but I think, even if we accept that the Gospels count as eyewitness accounts, I think that the resurrection argument can pretty much be beat on every levels, and so I feel kind of disappointed when people will just say, well, I'm going to it's miracle claims, so I'm not even going to take it seriously. And I'm going to hang up. That's all I got to say. Thank you for having me on. Love the show.
Thank you much.
Thanks very much for your call.
Who do we have next, Joe?
Next, you got Matthew from the UK.
Matthew from the UK. Call him up.
And he wants to
We're
know
calling-
if necessary. Okay.
We're calling across the pond, and you'll be shocked at the quality of the audio. As it sounds like he's right here. Matthew's sitting right there. We're lying.
Matthew? Oh, geez. Now, see, we have this moment. I'd like to make my own little 2012 prediction, and that is that the movie, which I think is by that name, that's coming out soon.
I think it's 2012.
is going to suck.
I wouldn't place bets against you.
I saw a more recent trailer for it, and it looks like it is, in fact, a thinly disguised remake of When Worlds Collide,
Oh, how
as was Deep Impact, which is silly because the original movie was by George Powell. Was
So
awesome.
reportedly, we have Matthew from the UK on the line.
Matthew?
Hello.
Hello?
Hello?
Hello there.
You're just very quiet. We've got you.
Okay, sorry, is that better?
There
Yeah,
you are. Yeah,
great.
awesome. What's up, Matthew?
All right, well, I was watching last week's show
Mm-hmm.
and about the morality, and there was a bit of trouble with the definition of necessary,
Uh-huh.
and I thought this, basically, it's quite simple. Something is necessary when there's only one way of doing something. So, if there are two ways of doing something, then one causes less harm than the other, and it's reasonable for the person to take the least harmful route, then that's the moral action.
So you're the guy that called in last week with
No.
the three
No.
rules? No?
No,
You're not
I
that
was
guy?
watching,
Oh, okay.
but I just wanted to call about this idea of necessary.
Yeah. It seems to me, though, that it's all too easy to have competing necessities, even if you get past the problem of defining, how you determine whether something is necessary or not. What if you've got a situation where party A needs to have one thing happen and party B needs another thing to happen, and then you've got a dilemma. And my reaction to this, we had a caller named Matthew last week who proposed these three rules of how to tell whether an action was moral or not. Huh?
There's a gnat.
Yes,
Oh. And
but it depends
It's-
on what is the aim. So if
Yeah.
your aim is, if a person's aim is to sorry, I'm getting confused by the delay.
Yeah, don't
if
listen to
somebody's
Yeah, don't watch the
aim is
stream.
to obtain money,
Yeah.
then that person tries to obtain money in a way that, I mean, I don't really understand the problem which you're presenting, basically.
The problem I'm presenting is, suppose you got two people on an island and they both need to eat, and there's just enough coconut for one of them. Right? I mean,
Okay.
that is a situation where there are two parties, each with a thing that they need, and they can't both be satisfied. So I just think, I think that you don't. I don't think that.
Because coconut isn't going to help either of them in the long run.
But let's not quibble, though. I mean, it's a fact that there are situations where two parties will be in a conflict because they each have a legitimate need. It just happens. And that was just a simple off the top of my head example. I just think my reaction...
I'm sorry. That's not helping me understand the problem you're presenting.
Well, I'm having difficulty. You called to challenge something that somebody else mentioned, and your first objection was on this issue of whether an action is necessary. And under your definition, it's necessary when it's the only possible action. And I'd say that if there's only one possible action, that there's that there's no moral dilemma at all. If there's only one possible, you have to have a choice in order for there to be a moral dilemma. You have to be able to evaluate two different actions. If there's only one action possible, which is what you're describing with your definition necessary, then there is no choice and no dilemma and no moral decision to be made.
No, I think there is even then.
Well, not if there's only one possible action.
Vampires. A vampire needs my blood in order to live, right? He, according to the other caller last week, gave 3 rules by which to judge the morality of an action, right? If it's intentional, unnecessary, and harmful to life, then it's bad, right? Well, here's a vampire. He intentionally harms me by taking my blood, which he needs. And I just want to, what I want to say about this idea that you can even boil morality down to a simple set of hard and fast rules is no, you can't. Because even if something is necessary, that does not, you have to take into account the rights of other people who might be impacted by that necessary action. I am not obligated to hand over my blood to a vampire just because he actually needs it.
So you're saying that the vampire needs the blood, and
Yeah.
that's the only thing.
We're going
some
with
aim that the vampire has.
Hang on,
The
let's...
only way of getting it is by
Right.
taking the blood.
That's
part of what you're saying.
Yes, if it is. If we're in this, of course there are no vampires, but suppose this is a hypothetical.
I have a better example.
Okay, go ahead.
Jeff and I are drowning in the ocean, and there's one life preserver that will only support one of us.
Right.
I need it to survive, and he needs it to survive.
Yeah. And that's the point. There are actual moral dilemmas. You can. I don't think it is possible to boil morality down to any small set of rules that when you apply them, they always give you the right answer. And the reason why you can't do that is there are real dilemmas that you're going to get from any set of rules like that. Moral decisions, you can use sets of rules like that as rules of thumb to get you as far as they can go, but you're still going to get into situations where, there, in the case of that Matt has hypothesized, there's no good answer. One of us is going to die, or we both will.
Okay,
that's just life.
It seems that, but in Matt's situation, it's got there's 2 equal claims for the life preserver.
Yeah.
And that I accept that, but I can see a problem there. The thing is, it seems that I'm not quite so dismissive of these rules of thumb as you've called them.
Well, I'm not dismissive of them, but I think you have to understand they only get you so far. right? There are
Okay.
no simple answers to moral dilemmas. I just don't think they're not universal simple answers, because when you start looking at all of the factors in a situation that you're trying to judge morally, it's all too common for there to be conflicts that can't be resolved by those kinds of rules of thumb. And then you just have to bite the bullet, make some kind of decision, and live with it.
Somebody else raised another question, and this might also go to show why, I like the idea of coming up with a simple guideline that you could perhaps use as a rule of thumb that may be able to address a wide variety of moral situations but not give you absolutes. Jeff and I are friends. If Jeff has a sunburn on his back and I intentionally, unnecessarily slap him on the back knowing that this is going to cause him pain, have I done something immoral? What if we have the type of relationship?
I would think you have.
What if we have the
It's
type?
fairly trivial, but you have.
What if we have the type of relationship where this type of thing is a gesture of affection? I screw with him and cause him pain on occasion. He screws with me and causes me pain on occasion. He's not,
Right.
upset.
Then we're at
It's like
then we're at a meta level where we have an agreement between us that, in fact, we're not going to judge things like that as bad.
Wait till you get a sunburn, some bitch.
It's-
I'm gonna come after you hard. That type of thing. It's. I don't think that anything immoral was done, because within the context of us, that is an accepted behavior. And you could even go towards,
I would agree. It depends on the aim. It depends on the aim.
Okay,
All right.
which is
So,
my only objection to it.
do we have any questions still out there unresolved? Or are
I'm
we-
sorry, I lost you. but
Have we answered this problem now? I mean, do you
I
have any
can
further
see
questions?
where you're coming from, I think.
Yeah.
But what I would say in response is that
Yeah.
it depends on the aim. So if your aim is to have a bit of fun, and it's not causing, in a way, the only way of having fun in that way is to slap your friend on the back who's got a sunburn. That's the only way of making that joke. It's
So in that case, you would say it was actually necessary because of the goal. So it doesn't fit all three criteria.
yeah.
Okay. I can see that.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that that those three rules that a caller presented last week never work. I'm saying that a set of rules like that is only going to get you so far. That's my only caveat about it. I mean, I like. Let me rephrase that. I don't like. I understand people wanting to have simple guides through moral quandaries, but the reason I understand that is because I think moral quandaries are, by definition, generally difficult and complicated, which is exactly why an overly simplistic set of rules isn't going to completely solve it. As a set of rules of thumb to get you as far through the problem as they can, that's fine. But what you would not want to do is make the mistake that, say, theistic people who latch on to, say, the Ten Commandments as their set of moral rules. If you mistake the set of rules for hard and fast, absolutely in every situation, these are going to solve the problem for you.
They're far too inflexible.
Then you've gone too far. Yeah.
Yeah, well, yes. No, I agree with that. Perhaps I'll email you with what I think in more. That's going to, rather than waste time here.
Okay.
But may I take up another question with you?
Sure.
Where to start with a premise and build up an argument on top of it. where should someone begin? It seems that a lot of theists, it's almost like they pick something quite specific and then they can build what seems to be a logical argument if you substitute all the terms, or this is at least possible, substitute all the terms for symbols. You might build a logical argument, but it's kind of rubbish in, rubbish out. But they would see it as valid because they would call it logical within, reasonably, but it all seems to come down to what they start with.
Yes.
And what's the answer to that?
To convince them that what they started with is unjustified. How you go about doing that, it's going to be different for every situation. And if I had the answer, I'd probably have a Nobel Prize at this point. It's part of why we do the show. It's part of why I do a lot of the things that I do and why I have so many email discussions, because we can talk all day about the structure of perhaps a logical argument and determine whether or not it's valid and sound. The fact of the matter is, from the standpoint of some believers, they have an argument which to them appears valid and sound because they accept a premise that I reject. And it could be the case that it's something as simple as they accept that the Bible is the Word of God type of thing. They accept this and they accept it as a sound premise, and so they can build arguments from it. And the only thing wrong with it is that they've accepted a premise that I don't see why
and
they
that's why the burden of proof issue comes up so often, because when you're talking about whether a premise is valid or not, you get into the question of whose responsibility is it to prove that the premise is valid or to prove that it's not.
Yeah.
Right? Where does that responsibility lie? And of course, it's their responsibility. It's the person positing
I don't have
an
a problem with
assumption.
that. I tend to.
That's the
sorry,
kind
I'm going to butt in.
Yeah, go ahead.
What seems to happen to me most of the time in their mind, and obviously this is just what I see, is they'll have an idea like exists, and they've got two concepts of exists. Like exists can be something which is in the mind, and exists is something which can be physically demonstrated. Mm-hmm. And then they'll build an argument with this idea of exists.
Right.
And although it's equivocating between two meanings, it looks valid to them because they've got this label exist, which when you put that label in the logical argument, it sort of makes sense. But if you try and analyse it, that you're trying to convince them that their idea of, they basically have no concept of existence. They've got two concepts, and they're trying to bolt them, two incompatible things together, and make it into one.
But if you've already sorted that out, then that's the point you need to address with them.
I suppose so.
And if you can't get them to see that they have, for example, two definitions of existence, then you may not be able to make headway on that front, and you may have to instead move back a step and have a discussion about, okay, what labels are we going to put on things? I hate, it's unfortunate that we have to do that so often. However, the reality is that the ability to communicate is dependent on people having a shared understanding of what words mean and what labels you're going to use. And it's one of the reasons I got an email.
Well, there's something strange. I agree with that. But there's something strange going on, because I'll start off by saying I want to say, for example, prove that God exists, and they may have this. I can't work out whether they've got this confused idea of existing or what. But when they start, but if they're trying to prove existence of God on the level of, almost equivalent level of physical existence, and they proceed through this argument, and really all they've done is demonstrated that they can think of God, therefore he's existing.
Which is why I don't do that.
I know.
It's what I do at the beginning is say, what do you mean by God and what do you mean by exist? Tell me what you believe and why. I got an email saying, somebody was basically saying I was a bad example for atheists, that I was childish and quick to hang up on people and quick to interrupt and cut them off. And I started a discussion. I haven't heard back from them, The thing is that when having a conversation, particularly with theists, although it does happen in other areas as well, and I'm not saying that atheists are immune to this either, I'm just talking about our experience on the show. Somebody will begin an argument and then proceed rapid fire through their argument with I don't know how many assertions that would take forever and a day to debunk and show the flaws in. But if I stop at the beginning and say, as rude as it seems, I'm interrupting you here because you've already said something for which we are not communicating effectively on. Either you've used words in ways that I don't agree with or don't understand, or you haven't adequately defined your terms, or you've made a bald assertion that I flatly reject. I can't let you continue the argument because basically we'll waste a whole bunch of airtime. You'll make a whole bunch of points and I'll go back to the beginning and say this is wrong. And what ends up happening, especially on the show, is that they've made a whole bunch of points that it looks like haven't been answered, that I just answered one. They don't understand that, I've taken out the knees of the argument.
Right.
So you're going to have to probably do more of that when people start talking about God exists. Tracy did a whole show, actually, on those two words.
Uh-huh.
God exists. What do you mean by God? What do you mean by exists?
With the jar full of dice.
No, it was a different show.
Oh, I saw that. I think in the the transcendental ice in the jar, and what you can't tell the difference between the transcendental dice and the non-existent dice.
That was actually an extension on a different show, but she did another show that was just about the two words God exists. So, on that note,
and perhaps I'll try and dig that out.
I appreciate you taking the call, Matthew, and we got a bunch of people waiting, so I got to get to going.
Yes, thanks for taking my call.
Thanks
Love the
for
show.
calling.
Thanks very much.
Okay, we got a question for you, Matt. What's your favorite Guitar Hero song?
For real? Do they want you to call them and ask this, or just?
Can the listeners hear you?
Oh no, they can't hear Joe.
So the question is,
somebody IM'd to find out what my favorite Guitar Hero song is. I have all of the Guitar Hero and Rock Band games. I couldn't possibly answer that because they haven't asked whether they're talking about guitar or drums.
Okay.
Now, you figure out which one and I'll tell you. Or I'll try to tell you. Anyway.
So,
Sean from Chicago about Alex Jones and Ray Comfort.
Okay, but you got something.
just to wrap up my response to the caller we just had. My policy is always, when debating with theists, go for the jugular. And the jugular can be anywhere. You look at the argument they're making and find the most fundamental core assumption that they have that you can undermine and go after that.
Yeah.
Right? And there always is one. If there wasn't, I wouldn't be an atheist.
We got, is it Sean from Chicago?
Yeah.
How are you,
John,
Sean?
what's up?
Thanks for calling.
I was just calling in. I wanted to say that you guys are awesome. I know a lot of people say it's great what you do, but I'm a relatively new atheist. I've been not really a believer my whole life. I never really believed, but I was raised in a kind of Christian family, and I watched a lot of what you guys done. I've watched a lot of the old stuff, a lot of the archive stuff, the nonprofits I'm getting into, which is a lot cooler than. Let me stop. It's pretty cool, though.
Well, thanks, Sean.
Yeah, but just to correct you, Matt here is awesome. I'm wonderful.
Right. Okay, that'll work. But anyway, I've been able to, from what you guys have done, I've seen how you guys deal with people as far as your demeanor and just how you go about breaking down different arguments. And it's helped me a lot because now I'm starting to make videos breaking down other people's arguments on YouTube. So I just want to thank you guys for that because you guys put a lot of stuff out there.
Well, thanks a lot, Sean.
And how would people find your videos on, on YouTube?
Yeah, well, you guys have videos on YouTube from like Freethinker and a couple other people, and then
but your stuff.
Matt,
you said you're making videos. How
Jeff's
can people...
letting you pimp your stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, it's Maverick 713.
Maverick 713. Thank you.
Maverick 713. I've done just a couple of videos, but I'm gonna be doing a whole lot more because I see a lot of bad information going out, and it's
awesome.
Cool.
Somebody has to say something about it. Thanks a lot, Jeff.
No, you're welcome.
And by the way, since we're in the stroking, I love the fact that you have a lot to do with like D&D stuff. I've seen some of your drawings. That's so awesome.
Thanks for that too. I'm now working on a massively multiplayer online game.
That's cool. I would definitely like to hear about that. Anyways, I know these guys in the chat room are they got pitchforks and
Yeah, they're going to get mad at you soon,
Yeah.
so we get
ask
to
a
questions.
question. Yeah.
Okay, so there's a couple of things. One, I was watching a video on YouTube, and this guy, Jesus Freak 777, was talking about his kid finally got at the park, saying that that our morality comes from God, about integrity. And I actually, like probably once a week or even more, I just ask them what integrity is and give me an example of it, that whole idea. And I wonder how somebody can teach their child about integrity if there's always somebody there watching. How does that concept even get, can you put that concept across to people? How can you do the right thing when nobody's around if there's always somebody around? I guess that's my big thing.
Oh, I see. That's an interesting question.
Yeah, actually, and for those who took longer than I did to even get it, you're talking about this idea of, the Sky Daddy watching.
Right.
Right.
That isn't
Exactly.
integrity. Yeah, I mentioned something similar ages ago when somebody brought this up, and I haven't used this example in a long time, I don't think, but imagine that you have two little kids, and one of them behaves because of a promise of dessert after dinner or because of the threat of getting a beating if they don't behave. And the other one behaves because they actually understand that their actions affect other people, and their own empathy and desire to, live relatively harmoniously is what drives them to do this.
Are you trying for one of those Obama fly-killing moments?
It was a gnat. Yeah, Obama's got nothing on me. Which one is the better kid? That was my question, is which one is the better kid? And I think your question, your example, goes to it in even greater detail, and that is, while mine focused on the idea of even if there isn't a God, there is this imposed threat, real or imaginary, of hell and
Right.
promise of heaven, and yours goes to the idea that, okay, if there is a God and he's watching every one of your moves, then you have no chance to exercise anything remotely like integrity because you're constantly being watched, and the integrity comes out when you're not being watched.
But okay, let me play Christian's advocate for a moment. Wouldn't a Christian say, or be able to say, yeah, but even I, as a Christian, have my doubts, and I am tempted, and so I can sometimes put aside my belief in God, my belief that He's watching me, and go for the selfish move.
Yes, and
But
when you've
wouldn't
done
they-
that, you've
wouldn't they
demonstrated
pull
that
that-
you don't have integrity. It doesn't matter whether somebody's
Exactly.
watching you or not.
Yeah.
Exactly. There's
Right.
no way around it. I mean, you can do the mental
What-
gymnastics and
What they'd
and
be
say what you're
saying is that
Jeff.
my real nature is to be an ass.
But they could also set aside their belief that God is watching them, and then not do the selfish thing.
Yes, and then they'd be an
But
atheist.
then they'd be admitting that that they didn't need that belief that the guy was watching them in order to do the good thing.
Well, I think it's a
Interesting.
great idea. Thanks a lot for feeding us that, Sean.
I have one other quick question, if that's possible.
Go right ahead.
Okay. One, I think you should debate Ray Comfort because I think that you would be able to corner him in a way where he can't run while on stage. That's just my opinion. And the other thing is I have this quote that I came up with, and I just think it's something that people should hear. Reason without action is apathy, but action without reason is anarchy.
All right.
That's
Okay.
I like it.
And also, if you could, I'm going to take this one off the air. If you could tell me how you feel about Alex Jones and Jason Burmis, because you're relatively geographically close to those guys, and that dude is like a nut job. I mean, what do you think
Wait,
about
which
him?
dude?
I don't know the
Jones
Jason
and
dude.
who?
Hey, Alex Jones, the guy that sounds like Man
Oh, I
Cow.
thought you said two names.
Yeah,
and Jason Burmis. He does Alex Jones's like blog.
I don't know Jason, the Jason character, but in fact, I've bumped into Alex Jones in the corridors of the
He broadcasts from the same studio.
Television studios where where the show is normally recorded. Not had a conversation with the man. Have seen videos. Yeah, he's a lunatic.
He's called into the show before, but he always gives us a fake name. He called in once while I was hosting to ask how 2 + 2 could equal 4 universally if there wasn't some god who had made 2 + 2 = 4.
Right.
That's the depth that Alex Jones possesses, and I don't have to comment on him further.
Yeah.
Right.
There's an amusing set of videos on YouTube, one with Alex Jones criticizing David Icke. Are you familiar with David Icke?
I've heard the name, and I think I've seen
David
that
Icke
video.
is this guy who claims that major political and business figures are actually lizards from like space.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a video of Alex Jones criticizing him and calling him a lunatic, and then another video of Alex Jones interviewing David Icke and like praising him to high heaven, which leads me to conclude that Alex Jones has concluded that in fact there are shape-changing aliens living amongst us, which is how I conclude that Alex Jones is a lunatic.
Yeah,
On the other hand, I should mention I am running a role-playing campaign right now where there's shape-changing aliens from outer space living amongst us, and our players have just found out, and it makes marvelous fiction.
I'm sure it does.
Thanks a lot for calling, Sean. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Quick notes on the Alex Jones front. Granted, I don't watch Alex's stuff anymore. I saw it early on when I moved to Austin. He does it from the same, or did do it from the same TV studio that we use. I know he's calling the show. I don't know that his praise of David Icke means that he buys into the alien conspiracy. The thing is that Jones is a conspiracy nut, and so is David Icke. And you have some overlapping conspiracies, but you may say, well, Icke's right about this, but boy, he's lost it over the lizard people thing.
Well, if he doesn't believe it, and I can embarrass him by pointing out that he's been inconsistent on the issue, then I'll be happy to do that.
In any case, I'm not a fan.
No.
At all. Not even remotely.
So, do we have another caller?
Update on your spoon. Is it a fork yet?
It's still a spoon.
This is a question about
Somebody said
the spoon.
Go ahead. Get another call ready. We're doing Gorilla TV. I'll get the spoon.
Matt is walking away from the television, and now there is the spoon. Now, how is the viewer supposed to know that is the same spoon? Maybe that the spoon is now a parrot.
I have no idea how they would know, because it's. But this is the same spoon that I carried around, and it hasn't changed.
And for viewers who don't know what that's all about,
somebody emailed to tell me that the reason they're convinced there was a God was because for years they prayed when they sat down to dinner that God would move the spoon from here to here. And one day, after going to a revival, they prayed for God to move the spoon from here to here. And instead, God turned the spoon into a fork right in front of their eyes. Now, Schilling was quick to point out that God actually failed the test.
Right.
God was incapable of moving the spoon. So
apparently, transforming one object into a completely different shape is easier for God than moving it 1 foot.
Evidently.
Okay, the shortcuts God will take, huh?
And I told them I'd take. They should pray, and I'll accept that miracles happen when the spoon turns into a fork or a butter knife. Somebody suggested a spork, but that would be the rough equivalent of a creationist transitional fossil, and so I'm just going to stick with fork and butter knife.
Okay.
And this one doesn't bend. At least not very easy.
Oh, give me that.
Who's next?
Rowan from Frankfurt, Germany.
Rowan?
Wow.
Rowan from Frankfurt, Germany. All right.
And is he on? We're waiting for him.
Joe's calling right now.
Okay, so what else can we say about that which has been said so far?
Dinner. Thank you. John's reminded me to let everybody know that we are not going to dinner after the show because it's Father's Day and people have things to do with dear old Dad. So stay tuned. Next week we'll go somewhere. It may be Pluckers again. It may not be. We'll let you know during the show. But for today, don't plan on an after-show dinner. Enjoy Father's Day. Is it Rohan from France?
Germany.
From Frankfurt.
From
Hi,
Frankfurt,
how are
Germany.
you?
Hi.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Long-time atheist, first-time caller.
All righty.
Hey, Matt, I've got a question for you. When speaking with my theistic friends and so forth, I try to approach the Bible or the refutation of the Bible from either philosophical or scientific view, and I'm not saying I'm the smartest guy, but half the time their eyes just gloss over. So, and the only thing they know is the Bible. So if I take it from a biblical perspective, such as trying to point out some of the silliest things in your Bible, and how should I do that without making it sound like I'm ridiculing them? For example, in the Bible you read about flying serpents, and if you mate a cow or a cattle in front of a striped stick, the offspring will be stripes, and
Right.
It's such like that. How do you talk to them without making it sound like ridicule, and still try to engage them in a conversation?
I don't know, because evidently I fail at this bigger than anybody.
Yeah, I would say there's two important things to remember. One is ridicule is the act of showing that something is ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
Now you can be honest about that, and it can be real ridiculousness that you're exposing, and then it's not your fault. The only kind of bad ridicule is if you make up lies to make something seem silly.
Right.
And the other thing is ridicule of that kind is in the mind of the beholder, right? So if they are gonna take it as an insult to their beliefs, you're gonna have to deal with that, no matter how nicely you try to phrase it.
Lately I've taken it.
I was thinking of, even if you quote verses that it's obvious that you didn't make it up. You're simply reading from the Bible. If you actually quote the actual verse where these silly things come from, and sincerely ask them, do you honestly believe this stuff?
Yep.
And the more they try to defend it, the sillier it sounds. And
Yes.
ultimately they might get their feelings hurt, and they automatically tune out.
But you didn't do that, and I think that the approach you're taking is the best one I can recommend. It's pretty much what I've tried to do more often, more recently, which is instead of talking about how silly something is, just saying, okay, look, what is your, because there are people who who are Christians or who have some idea of Christianity or their particular theology that don't believe everything in the Bible. They don't believe it's the inspired word of God. They don't believe it's necessarily instructional. Perhaps some of them think that it's the best efforts of men to try and understand something that is not really comprehensible, but they've come in contact with through some spiritual means that they can't quite describe, in which case you'd have to take a different approach. But for people who believe that the Bible's the word of God and would try to say that they believe it, literally, absolutely, whatever, I tend to, more often than not, I've focused on the Bible's clear advocation of slavery, right down to them being property that you can pass on to your children and beat, as long as you don't actually beat them to death, as long as they don't die within 2 days of the beating.
Right. That would be taking it from a standpoint of the more undesirable things in the Bible, and again, they just go through all kind of verbal gymnastics trying to defend all.
Yeah, they will.
Talking about the difference between the Old Testament and the New. We have a New Testament now, and it's just
it's still the same, but it's still the same God, right?
Right.
I mean, if you show me a guy who advocated slavery 3,000 years ago, but then changed his mind, I'm still going to be suspicious of that guy.
Well, it's not just that. It's, for example, once upon a time I was a Christian, or at least I thought I was. I'm not going to get into the whole was I a true Christian.
Me too.
Now I'm an atheist. What I say now is different from what I would have said then, and that's fine, because I don't simultaneously claim that I was correct then. I
Right,
was
that-
wrong then.
Yes,
I'll fess that up right at the beginning.
This guy 3,000 years ago who advocated slavery also said that he was the ultimate moral lawgiver.
Not only that, but his new version comes along and says that everything that he did before was right and good, and it is to be upheld.
And in fact doesn't say anything against slavery in the New Testament. So
the people who would like to throw out the Old Testament are in a bit of a quandary, because first of all, without the Old Testament, you don't have your creation story, you don't have the original sin with the fall, you don't have any of the prophecies or supposed prophecies that they'd like to claim lead to Jesus, you don't have the Ten Commandments, which is Ray Comfort's bread and butter, and is up on, I don't know, the lawn of our state capitol along with other places. So if you check all that out, what do you have? You have a story of a bunch of people believe something for no clear basis, and yet the people in that story, for example, Jesus, continually makes reference back to Moses and the law and the other thing. You can't have one without the other. And the people who think you can simply don't understand what it is that they believe. They don't understand their own theology. They are cultural Christians. They have their own invented religion with their own ideas that is not supported by the Bible, and at best, once you get them cornered to the point where they have to acknowledge this, that they're not biblical Christians or they're not based on the Bible, it won't matter to them anymore, because to them, you haven't undermined that what they believe is true. You've just shown that, this particular justification didn't work.
Right, and just to set the record straight, for those who think that we only beat up on Christians, the Quran is just it's filled with its share of ridiculousness, and particularly the one that hits me is a chapter called the Moon, chapter 54, verse 1, and it says Muhammad split the moon simply by pointing at it, and if they don't believe me, they could look it up. So, but again, thanks guys, and keep doing what you're doing. You're great.
Thank you much. Appreciate the call.
yep, thanks for calling.
Okay.
And I would bet that some Muslim would say, well, what they're talking about is the divide between the dark and light sides of the moon. Not sides. That's not accurate and fair.
Hemisphere.
Phil Plate's going to chew me up for that one later, I'm sure. Who's next?
Ingmar from Sweden.
Ingmar from Sweden.
Wow.
How do season affect everyday life? You can call.
All right.
All right.
We're calling Ingmar from Sweden, who I
Yeah,
think he
you
actually emailed me, although I'm sure there's lots of Ingmars here.
I think all that we atheists are obliged to do when we're debating religion is be accurate. We're not obliged to spare their feelings. You can spare their feelings if you think that's necessary in the particular discussion you're having. But
Hello.
Hello.
hello,
Yeah, hi. This is Ingmar, yeah.
is this?
And it was me that emailed you.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank you for the show. I discovered it a while back, and I've been following the old videos on Google Video now for the past month or so. And I really have to thank you for the Skype thing, so you don't have to call in with my cell phone. It's very good.
All right. Well, we'll see what we can do about keeping it going, possibly.
Oh yeah. Well, the question I had was that I've gotten the feeling that situation for you guys with theism in public is a bit different from what I'm used to here. What I'm used to is that theists here are not very open and outspoken about their faith. People generally don't talk a lot about faith or religion in public, and
You want a roommate?
What?
Sorry, keep going. I'm just making a joke.
Matt wants to move to where you live.
Okay. Well, I get the feeling from people calling in and from the news stories and other stuff you talk about that your situation is a lot different. So my question is really if it's really that different, and do you get faced with a lot of theism openly from day to day that you cringe at, for example? Is that and how do you deal with that if that's the case?
You go.
Yeah, I mean, it's pervasive throughout our culture that there are God references all over the place. I think that the tide is turning a little bit. I'm not as terrified of an imminent, like, theistic takeover of our country, like an overt theocracy, like I was a few years ago. And I see a lot of theists here starting to be more careful what they say, or circling their wagons, not having as much influence as they used to have. That's partly the new administration, and I think partly shell shock from the rise of the so-called new atheists that have made a big impression here in the U.S.
For me, day to day, it's not like I'm constantly accosted with religious stuff or persecuted for not necessarily believing it. I'm actually, the reason I do the show isn't because I'm afraid of theocracy or because I'm sick to death of everywhere I go there's Jesus this or Jesus that. It's partly preventative. It's also educational in the sense that I don't have a desire, I don't have a practical vision of a utopia, but I do have a practical vision of a better society, a better United States, a better Earth, where at some point it would be nice to... Did the stream crash?
I think so.
We think the stream crashed.
And so who would be seeing us now if the stream crashed? Anyone?
Nobody's seeing us, but Ingmar should still be able to hear us.
Ingmar, are you still there?
Okay.
I can see.
No. They're going to get the stream back up. In the meantime, I'll just tell you that I hadn't actually gotten around to reading all of your emails, but I know that they're there.
Yeah, I heard you had a lot of... You were backed up on emails. Don't worry too much about it.
Yeah.
If you get a chance to, then whatever. It's not the end of the world.
Well, because we're recording the DVD, I'll go ahead and answer the question. When the stream gets up, it gets up. I don't have a vision of a utopia. I'm not trying to get everything perfect. But we have real big issues that are caused by religious beliefs in other places. The Middle East springs to mind right off the bat. There are plenty of other issues like that that can't really be resolved until we fix the little things and change people's perspective on basic human rights, freedoms, and the effect that their beliefs, be they religious or not, have on other people. And while, yes, this show spends a great deal of time in conversation with theists and Christians in particular, and focusing on, the absurdity or atrocities within the Bible or within, Christian theology, the fact of the matter is that most Christians that I encounter on a daily basis are not fundamentalists. They are not extreme in any sense. Some of them are kind of amused that our show exists and that we get into debates, etc. But there is this undercurrent. There are people like Ray Comfort, like Pat Robertson, who have the financing and platform to spread a message out that I think even if people don't go, aha, now I'm a Pat Robertson clone or a Ray Comfort disciple, they're spreading memes that do affect people. They change the way people look at things, the way people think of things. I have family and friends with family who I get emails from people who you just would not believe some of the things that they say. And while you may not deal with it in the workplace around here, in people's homes, you find out what they really think.
Yeah.
At family gatherings, if you're an atheist and nobody knows it and you just sit quietly in the corner, just pay attention at a family gathering where there's a bunch of religious people, and you'll start to pick up on not just what they think, but how dramatically different from you they think about simple things, about basic rights, about what we should or shouldn't do, about where freedoms begin and end. That's probably what I go after more than. This is not coming from a place of where I've been persecuted for being an atheist, or where I'm constantly accosted by Christian messages.
Yeah, and just to clarify, me neither, but that was his question.
Yeah.
But I also want to say that as ironic as this might be, I think that it has been to the benefit of atheists in the U.S. that the religiosity here has been so overt and over-the-top ridiculous. Because if we had a bunch of people following Pat Robertson or Swaggart or any of those creeps secretly in large groups and not being really overt about it and just influencing our culture from within, where there was little to point at and go, look, that's just crazy, that would be bad. So it gives us something to react to. Of course, I'd rather it wasn't there at all, but given a choice of having it be overt or covert, I mean, when we have, say, an abortion doctor murdered by a fundamentalist right-to-lifer, boy,
Yeah.
sure would have been better if the activities of his organization or the organizations he associated with, that if those were much more public. Because then there could be a conversation about it, and there could be a obvious backlash against that. Instead, when they're hidden off in their their little private groups talking amongst themselves, every once in a while one of them comes out and does something crazy.
It's oftentimes somebody will ask, well, why don't you go after Islam more often? Don't you think Islam is much more dangerous? Globally, you betcha, no doubt about it. In practice of my understanding of the average practitioner, I think Islam in its current state is definitely more dangerous. I don't spend a lot of time on Islam because I don't have to deal with them very often. There's no Islamic power base that is attempting to, by legislation, marginalize my rights or dramatically affect the way business is done in this country. The difference is that people don't see is that Christianity has within it just as much, if we're talking about the Bible as the basis, which who knows, has within it just as much potential for evil and destruction as Islam. Christianity shouldn't get any credit for the fact that it was dragged kicking and screaming from its evil practices by changing culture in part because of secular, in part because of the merging of different religious cultures. The fact that the Christianity people practice now is safer, less harmful, is not something that Christianity should be credited with. It's something that society as a whole should
do it themselves.
Yeah. In the Bible, and I'm not going to get chapter and verse right now, it's clear. If your husband or wife or somebody should try to lead you to worship false gods, you are to put them to death, and it specifically says that your hands should be the first upon them. That's not open for interpretation. That's not a fuzzy, it's a euphemism. We didn't really mean kill them. It's the same thing as death to the infidels. It's just translated slightly differently, and nobody pays any attention to it or puts it in practice. But the potential is still there. And in the right hands, the right influential people can grab hold of a congregation, and by gradually feeding them more and more authoritative bullshit, can lead them to the point where they can commit atrocities. You see this? Waco, okay, they weren't Christian in any conventional sense, but they built off of that. Jim Jones built off of that. And I'm sorry to all you Christians who are going to get pissed off about this, I'm not making any claim about him. Hitler built off of that. And by the way, funded by the Catholic Church. The potential is still there. And I, despite the fact that I'm not accosted or pained by Christians on a regular basis, and I have plenty of them that are friends and family that I love, who would never go down that route, who could never be led that far astray. They have built their own custom Christianity that is safe and largely protected from that. The potential is still there, and that is why I'm never going to quit what I'm doing.
Right.
Yeah. Well, at least there's something positive about the openness about the faith. Then, and I'm 28 now, and I've people I've known basically all my life that I have no idea if they believe in God or not.
Yeah.
Because I've become a bit fascinated with religious faith, because it just seems so illogical to me that I find it hard to understand how people can get into a mindset like that. So I've been diving into the concept lately. Part of why I've been watching your show as well. So yeah. Well, that was my question. I should perhaps leave and let you get to some other callers. But thanks for the show, and if you keep Skype going, maybe I'll call in some other time as well.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks for your call. Yeah.
We got about 20 minutes left in the show.
And to those Christians who would maybe complain that, Matt is admitting it's just a sort of a lunatic fringe within Christianity who take things too far, and that's about the same thing as admitting that you're making a slippery slope argument. My response to that is, who do you think is going to keep people from sliding down that slope?
Yeah.
It's not.
Slippery slope isn't always a fallacy.
There's not that much. I grew up in a moderate Christian family, and there was nothing in my Christian upbringing that really put any brakes on the danger of sliding down that slope. The only people I ever met who make an effort to prevent Christians from sliding down that slope are atheists.
Yeah.
We perform an important service, even just keeping Christians from going too nuts.
Yeah. And I freely admit that the problem is in the fringe, but the problems that we have to actually actively have to deal with are in the fringe.
And it's a fringe.
But the problem, the big problem, is one of truth.
Right.
And how you go about discerning it. And I'm of the opinion that I'd prefer people believe as many true things and as few false things as possible as I would want to do.
Yeah, and that's how I got into atheist activism. Yeah. And I never would have made any kind of public stink about my atheism at all if it wasn't for the fact that I care whether my fellow citizens are believing a bunch of freaking nonsense.
Yeah,
because it matters what you believe.
Your actions affect the rest of us.
Right. Your beliefs affect your actions, and your actions affect everybody else.
Who's next, Joe?
See, we got a request for Jeff to do Pat Robertson impersonations.
No, I don't do Pat Robertson. That was Pat Robertson on the audio show.
Yes.
It's never been me.
But if we were to hold up a Christian flag...
And he's not here today, we're sorry.
Oh.
Huh?
I was thinking that we could temporarily hold up a Christian flag so that you could leave and Pat Robertson could come in, but...
Yeah, he gets enough airtime.
Okay, D from Paris, France, anti-atheist prejudice from other atheists.
Okay. We're calling D from Paris, France.
We have not a single theist today with the balls to call this show. What happened to him? We definitely had a guy last week who said he was going to call back in. What happened to him?
Joe's not getting IMs from theists.
I will just mention, I've noticed from long years of experience doing this show, that when theists think that you're going to be prepared for what they have to say, they tend not to call.
Hello?
Hello.
Is this D from Paris?
Yes, it is. Hi, Matt.
Hi,
Hi, Jeff.
and if you'll pardon me for a second, I have one quick announcement to do beforehand. Since there's only 15 minutes left in the show, as a reminder, there's no after-show dinner today. I got to keep hammering that point home. It's Father's Day here in the United States, and so people are going to spend time with Dad. So how you doing, Dee?
I'm doing just fine. Thanks a lot, Matt. Yeah. Perhaps prejudice is a little bit overstating it, but I'm kind of an out atheist, and by the way, it does seem to be very much European Atheist Day today, doesn't it? Well, not too long ago, we went out for some beers with some friends, and yeah, sorry, no French accent. I'm not French.
I figured that part out already.
Yeah, that was for the chat room.
Oh, ignore them and ignore the stream.
Yeah. Anyway, I went out with some beers with some friends. One of whom is a Christian, and I wasn't particularly familiar with how a Christian he was. I figured he was just one of these go to church and that's pretty much it thing.
Yeah.
And it turns out that actually he was an evangelical, but it wasn't a big deal. We had a good chat about stuff. But the other two guys, who were also atheists, were really hostile to me because basically I was arguing religion with the evangelical guy, and it was bizarre because he was much more chilled out than they were. And at one point, I even said something like, "Well, it's." I think I said that people who believe something as ridiculous and obviously fake as flat Earth theory are idiots. And their faces dropped and they said, "You apologize to him right now or you get out because he's a young Earth creationist."
Well,
so what did he say?
He was very quiet and he was very interested when I started talking about geology, and we agreed to pick it up later. And the whole conversation ended basically with us agreeing that there was no possible way his personal experience would convince me of God. But he was willing to look at my evidence later offline. But my two atheist friends, it's like they had the whole Daniel Dennett faith in faith thing. You know what I mean?
So, despite being atheists, they were appalled that you would speak so honestly and unfavorably to somebody else about things that they potentially believe.
Yeah. Even though the guy I was talking to wasn't as offended as they were.
are you guys? You said this is a group of friends. Are you all equally good friends, or was there any reason why those two would be more concerned about preserving their friendship with this Christian than you were? I mean, I'm just there could be all kinds of social dynamics going on that we know nothing about.
Well, what I think it is I think that they actually buy into the whole thing that he would not be as nice and generous and awesome a guy as he is if he didn't believe in God.
Wow. Well, do you think that's true?
You know what? I don't think that he needs God to be a great guy, because he is awesome guy. Like, he does a load of charity work, and the secularists, we get in and help him with that. But I don't know.
Yeah.
So are you a nice guy too?
Well, I try, but
The thing is, I've had similar. I've never been in that situation, but I've had similar things happen over email where somebody would write in and say, "I'm an atheist, but I wish you guys would stop this because it's just. I mean, you're making us look bad. You sound, childish. You're being rude to people. You're being dismissive. And if that's, I would hope that for the most part, having conversations people would be adult enough and understanding enough to know, to be able to, one, tell the difference between when I'm attacking ideas and when I'm attacking people, because there's a big difference. And number two, to recognize that just because I've been kind of plain-spoken or used, a harsh word, saying that this is an idiotic idea or anybody believe this is an idiot, that if I'm not riled about it, if I'm actually having a discussion about this, where clearly I'm open to having my mind changed based on some criteria, and I think there are some people who are so afraid of the volatility of the discussion that they just rather it didn't occur. They're so terrified of, I don't want to ruffle feathers, I don't want to do any, so I'm just going to sit here and be quiet. And I understand that because not everybody's an out atheist, and certainly not everybody is comfortable around conflict. My problem with that is that I think that, at least in the United States, and largely in the United States and somewhat throughout the world, we're in the situation that we're in because for too many years, religion was a taboo subject. Oh, when you're at a dinner party, you don't talk about politics or religion. Well, now all of a sudden you can talk about everything. And some people are uncomfortable with that. Now, the only response that I would have had to those two is, I'm sorry if this is offending you. And I'd have looked at the individual I was talking to and said, am I offending you? Because if so, I apologize. It's not my intent to offend you. But I see no reason why I should have to not express how I truly feel about this stuff.
Right.
We're having a conversation. Isn't that what that's for?
Right.
I mean, if the only conversations we can have are non-confrontational, why don't we just all run the Weather Channel all the time?
Plus, if in fact we really care what's true, we have to have these conversations. We can pick when to have them and who to have them with, but it has to happen. Personally, I don't buy the argument, and I've encountered this too, right? Atheists saying, oh, don't rock the boat, those Christians are so crazy, or they really need that in order to be happy, or if they didn't believe that, then they'd be an awful person, right? I don't buy that because I do buy the Richard Dawkins idea that religion is a meme, a mimetic organism. And it seems to me that the reputation religion has as something that if you challenge it, they rise up with pitchforks and come after you, or something that if you take it away from someone, then you've destroyed their life and they would be sad forever. Those sorts of things. Those to me smell like defense mechanisms, and respecting them just reinforces that mimetic defense mechanism that religion has. The only way to turn religion into something where they're not going to rise up with pitchforks and come after you if you challenge them, and they're not going to be able to claim that without it it would destroy their lives and they would be sad, is to not respect those reputations. Just barrel right on through and say what matters is what's true.
Yeah, I agree with you. I just thought it was interesting that it was actually the non-theists who were wading in with the defense mechanism instead of the theistic guy.
There is one big example of this going on, at least in the States, between, is it the National Academy of Sciences? But there are those people, evolution educators, who say that science educators should not hide the fact that evolution is a challenge to religion. And then there's those who say, oh no, we absolutely have to hide that or we'll never succeed in getting people to believe evolution. And that's a huge debate that's going on right now. If you follow Pharyngula,
yes, I do.
P.Z. Myers, that's been covered a lot in there. I think that's the same kind of debate.
Yeah, the accommodationist thing is just
exactly
ridiculous.
Right. Yeah.
I have one other question on this. Do you remember how the conversation got started?
Well, actually, it's one of those things that apparently usually comes up when the three of them are out on the town anyway. So I'm not sure why why they were suddenly so defensive against me, except that I'm a regular viewer of the Atheist Experience and an ACA member. So maybe I was just a little bit too atheistic. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, I was wondering, there was the issue of whether you brought it up or whether the other guy brought it up or whether it just happened in conversation. But if it turns out that this is a conversation type that happens between the three of them when you're not there, there may be another answer. And I don't want to toss this out. I've already told you what I think is going on. There's another possibility in that these other two individuals aren't as well versed in the arguments, and over the course of several discussions may have become partially convinced by this individual you were talking to. They may be more on the fence of this than you would have suspected. I don't know what their beliefs are. I certainly don't know what their abilities are. But I mean, if you are well-spoken and skilled at actually having debates and conversations about these things, and they're not, that might also have made them uncomfortable too, especially if they'd started to get twinges of being convinced by things he'd said.
Well, that's certainly possible. One of them I've spoken to before, and he identifies himself as agnostic, and he's got a kind of an odd idea that mathematical precision and beauty, it's basically the argument from design for the whole universe. But yeah, he doesn't believe in a specific God, but he's got there must be something out there kind of thing going.
Yeah.
Well, we have less than 2 minutes left on the show. I got to let you go, but I appreciate the call.
Yeah. No problem at all.
I will say this, you can go ahead and hang up that call. I want to wrap some stuff up. One thing that I used to say on the show when things like this have come up is that I don't go door to door and I don't call people. Now I can't say that anymore because we're actually calling them. The difference is that they've asked us to call.
They asked you to call.
Yes,
right?
they requested it. I don't run around. There are a few friends where I will raise the topic, but it's more as a meta discussion. It's not a debate between us. But it's not like, if I see a family praying at the table next to me, I start snickering or get up and say, gosh, I wish you'd stop that. That's absurd. I couldn't possibly do anything like that. So quick notes, because we have a minute left on the show. Thanks to Jeff for coming over to Dillahunty.
Thank you, Matt.
And the guys who set all this stuff up and made it all happen. Frank and John and Joe are all here. And Kathleen stopped by to see Dillahunty International Studios as well. We'll be back next week. We're not going to dinner today. It's Father's Day in the United States. So if you're in the United States, and even if you're not, give your dad a call. Tell him hi. Happy Father's Day. I love you. I miss you. That type of stuff. And we'll see you again next week.
Bye, folks.
That's when you start the music.
I ejected the CD, so.
Oh, you ejected the CD? No music. Do, 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 do. Still a spoon. No music sucks.
This is very awkward.
Yeah.